We all know I have been critical of Tua to this point in his career. Even when he's had sensational games, I've poo-pooed them at times. I still, and this feels awkward to say, do not believe that Tua is the man to lead the Dolphins to a Super Bowl. I say that it's an awkward time to say it because at this point, who cares? It's all about his long-term health. Because last night, when he goes into that prone position after the concussion, it's terrifying. It's the part of football that we all hate most. We love the aerial acrobatics. We love the hitting. We love close games and game-winning field goals. We love 3 hours on a Sunday or 3.5 hours on a Saturday. We love sitting down to the recliner and watching the game of football. But we hate when guys are so injured they're brought off on a stretcher. And last night was that. And so the fact that Tua was discharged from the hospital and traveled home last night with the team is of extreme positivity and optimism and good vibes because that's the only thing that really matters. Did the Dolphins commit negligence by pushing him through, knowing he was concussed last week, and allowing him to play on a short week? You hope not, but maybe. You know, this was my read last night, and it made me sick to my stomach, but my read in the middle of this game was last week Tua suffered a concussion, but passed protocol, wanted to go back out there, so he said it was a back injury. The Dolphins played the Bills in a huge game, so they were going to believe him. They wanted to believe him, inclined to believe him. And then this week, again, maybe he lied his way through protocol. Maybe he legitimately passed protocol. But the Dolphins would rather do see no evil, hear no evil. Doctors said you didn't have a concussion, so that's what we're going with. Even though they knew he wasn't right in playing. That's how it felt. That Tua either gamed the system to pass it last week in the middle of that game, and the Dolphins just kind of ran with that this week, or that they didn't really put him through the battery of tests that they should because they wanted him to play. But the more I thought about that, the more I said, for me to believe that, I've got to believe only my very secondary vision of this, detached from everything, and believe that I'm right and they're wrong. And that's where we stand in society, and I want to guard against that. Because what am I going on? I'm going on that last week he looked like he had a concussion when he stumbled trying to come off the field. And then I get confirmation from that because there's a lot of other former athletes, fans and media that saw the same thing and came to the same conclusion. And then I've got Chris Nowinski, who is a CTE expert, and he's leading the charge on brain trauma knowledge, and he's saying the same thing before the game. What I said yesterday on this show, that they can't play him tonight, and if they do, there is going to be a really ugly situation if he does get a concussion. And Nowinski went so far as to say, if he dies, there's murder charges. These guys are going to jail. So you feel confirmed because you saw what you saw last week. You feel a certain way from what you saw, and then everybody else is saying the same thing. But what am I going on besides just what I see? I've got no other information. What's supposed to have happened was there's an independent neurologist that's going to test Tua out last week. He's not affiliated with the Dolphins. He has no skin in the game. And it's up to him whether to clear him or not. And he was the one, or she was the one, this neurologist, that said, it's not a concussion. It's a back injury. Just like Tua said, he cleared it. He can go back out and play. And then I'd also have to believe that Mike McDaniel, who is not an old school rub dirt on it and go back out and play after your bell was rung kind of guy, has to also be in on this. Hey, we need to win this game. this is a big one against the Bills. You got to get back out there. Or this is a big game against the Bengals. They won the AFC last year. You got to get back out there in a short week. And I've got to believe that Mike McDaniel, who is an offensive guy, who's worked with a staff that's been very forward-thinking and progressive over the last couple of years in pushing offenses forward and being kind of a youthful new vibe in the NFL with McVay and Shanahan, et cetera. I've got to believe that he is cut from the oldest school cloth there is and really doesn't care too much about his players' health and is just built out of that old mindset, win at all costs. And I don't believe that with Mike McDaniel. I don't. Now, I don't personally know him, but he does not give me that vibe. So I had to catch myself last night from thinking automatically the worst to, is it possible we saw something that certainly triggered us all to think that it was a concussion, but obviously we don't know. And there's a strong part of me that says that's probably the case. Oftentimes the simplest answer is the right answer, and the simplest answer is we don't know that it was a concussion. We're just going on a 2-second clip we saw. It certainly looked like it, but maybe it wasn't it. And just this happened to happen last night. Now, if it was a back injury and they put him out there with a vulnerable, compromised back injury or ankle injury, could that lead to a lack of stability, a lack of core strength, and then to his head snapping back and hitting the turf? That's totally plausible. But I'm just not going to sit here on 200 affiliates and our huge national audience and sit here and go, fire McDaniel and fire Greer and fire the Dolphins and the medical team sucks and it was all in cahoots and they only wanted to win a football game and Tua's life is on the line. And I can't do that based on just what I'm looking at from thousands of miles away last week in a 2-second clip and say, oh, he definitely had a concussion last week. I just can't do that in good faith. I can say what didn't help matters last night was the Amazon coverage, because it felt like everybody in America was going, whoa, why did he play tonight if he had the concussion last night? And then this happens, there's blood on your hands, and Amazon wouldn't touch it. And that felt like a league cover-up. Now, again, simplest answer is usually the right answer. Amazon is a couple of games into a brand new multi-year, huge $1 million contract, multi-hundreds millions of dollars. They don't want to piss off the league, and they're not used to doing it. So they go down to the field, and Carissa Thompson has Tony Gonzalez, Richard Sherman, and Ryan Fitzpatrick. And these guys are not exactly, Brinkley down there, not exactly Rather, Brinkley, and Cronkite. And everybody's like, don't say anything. It's better to not say anything to upset anybody. So what they talk about is basically how their heart goes out to Tua. It was really scary. Fitzpatrick has tears in his eyes. But what they're not saying is the obvious. Should he have been playing? They could at least address it to say that was a question coming into tonight. That'll be a question asked tonight. Last week was a scary situation. This was as well. Related to one of your stories from your playing days. But they didn't even address it, which meant it felt like, man, you guys are covering for the league here that something went wrong. So that added to this paranoia last night that built on social media of it's all a cover-up. They're all covering their asses. Only when Amazon got wind of just how bad they looked did they force Michaels and Herbstreit to talk about it in the booth with a predetermined cutaway. Hey, we're going to show you guys in the booth, talk about it, and talk about the fury that's happening outside. And they did quickly, and then they went right into, boy, isn't it funny that Mike McDaniel's kind of like Ted Lasso? Keep it light, keep it moving. And you're like, oh, that wasn't the right tone either. So I think the coverage last night really hurt, believing that Tua's best interests were at heart or that it was an honest assessment, that he really didn't have a concussion, because everything felt like they were hiding from the reality. last night, Mike McDaniel addressed this, and McDaniel was very forceful in saying, I would never play the game that way. I'm not going to put my players at odds, at risk. I'm not playing with health here. That's not even the type of guy I am. And it was a start, I thought, of the Dolphins having to own that way. That it was not even in question that they did not feel like he had a concussion, and to be very forthright about this. And the next step is the NFL and the Dolphins should be transparent about the concussion protocol last week and then this week, because that's going to be important here. The doctor that cleared him last week to go back into that game in the second half should answer questions. What did you see? What did you observe? What was the battery of tests? How did you know it wasn't a concussion? Why did you feel comfortable it was a back? And then it was, okay, Dolphins, what'd you do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning with the potential that he was at risk for another concussion? Did you ever consider it? Was there any more tests? Who tested? What did they test? Was there concern with the back? And that, I think, is the only way you reestablish trust that this was not a cover-up. Will we get there? I don't know. You know, the NFL has at times been transparent, at times been completely non-transparent. So I don't know. I would say this. This has always been the NFL's nightmare. That today, because of more knowledge and experience with CTE, post-concussion symptoms, post-career playing effects of brain trauma, and everybody on high alert, that a guy would suffer it, be put back into a game, and that something really bad would happen to a star on national TV, and all hell would break loose. And there would be litigation and cleaning house and massive lawsuits and charges or whatever. That's always been, which is why they installed the independent neurologist so that they couldn't be held accountable for the idea that we pushed them back out of the field. We pushed them back out of the game of play. So there's all of these checks and balances the NFL has put into place so that they're not vulnerable in litigation, which is why I got a tough time believing that there's going to be some type of hell to pay for the NFL or the Dolphins, because they're also scared of this situation. You know, we look at it as any given Sunday, cutthroat, rub dirt on it, go out there, risk your bodies and your brains. And sure, there's an element of this. But remember, these are businesses looking to save their ass from litigation. There's also that in play as well. And when that's in play, they have their protection so that they can't be held accountable for something like this that happens, because they are following some type of protocol to make sure they're safe. Now, maybe the reality exists somewhere in between, but I got a tough time believing that we're ever going to find a smoking gun where they basically pushed him back onto the field to play knowing that there was a brain injury or a concussion last week. I don't think that that's realistic to think.